There has been 33 Hearthstone expansions with over 1,000 cards released total. So what Hearthstone card is the best of the best? We are looking at every expansion, yes, even the bad ones, and finding the best card in each expansion. Then we'll rank the best card from every expansion in order to see which expansion people complain the most in. We are ranking these cards based on their overall impact on standard. Sorry Wild players, Blizzard doesn't care about you, so neither will I. Starting with Hearthstone's first expansion, the Curse of Naxxramas. It's 2014. People are scared of Ebola outbreaks. Scotland decides to stay a part of the United Kingdom. Oh, that's funny. They made up a country called Scotland. And Hearthstone released some of their most iconic cards. Zombie Chow was the original anti-aggro minion. Play this on the board on turn 1 when you're playing a control deck. You can stop all sort of minions. You can play this and trade against leper gnomes and still stay alive on the board. You can even trade up into the 2-mana Knife Juggler. You don't really care about the 5 health healing your opponent because you're not trying to win in the first 3 turns anyways, so that health does not mean anything at all. Loatheb was also an annoyingly good card. 5-mana 5/5 is decent in stat lines, but the effect of making spells cost 5 more just totally disrupts a lot of people's game plans. Mad Scientist was also used. You play that in your Secret Paladins, so you get stuff like Redemption, Noble Sacrifice, stuff like that. You also play that in Hunter with all the Hunter secrets and Eaglehorn Bow, but nothing compares to the terrors of the Undertaker. It's one of those cards where you play it on turn 1 and you just win. You can maybe Arcane Shot it, you could Frostbolt it, maybe play some minions, but it doesn't matter because it keeps scaling each time you play it. It basically gets healed every turn for +1/+1 depending on how many Death Rattle minions you play. It was mostly played in an aggro Death Rattle Hunter with things like Mad Scientist, Leper Gnome. You play this on turn 1, play these cards on turn 2, it scales and you just lose. So Undertaker was an easy pick, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it doesn't get any easier from here on out. A lot of expansions from here on out have a lot of cards that could be the best card. Case in point, Goblins versus Gnomes. This expansion saw a lot of mechs, things like Mech Warper and Piloted Shredder being really good in Mech Mage specifically, and Mech Paladin too. And again, one of Hearthstone's most iconic cards was dominating this meta too, and that card was Dr. Boom. But he's not my choice for the best Hearthstone card this expansion.
You need to leave!
Okay, hear me out. Dr. Boom, great card, amazing win condition. You plop it on the board and it's hard to remove with all the 7 health and all. The bots are good for trading or just general damage to the face too. A lot of decks played it too because they need a big win condition at the end and they're not control decks, so they can't play all the bigger win conditions. It's a versatile card too. A lot of control decks could play it. You could play it at the end of mid-range decks as a win condition. But there is another card which was also powerful in the same meta, which is still powerful today. And that card is Muster for Battle. Back in the day, aggro or mid-range paladins would just play this card in combination with a few cards like Knife Juggler on turn 2 and maybe Quartermaster for a big buff turn after. And if you can't remove those 1/1 silver hand recruits, you just kind of have a bad time. That was the meta for a while. Muster for Battle was relevant until it rotated out, but both Dr. Boom and Muster for Battle have come back into standard as a part of the yearly core collection. But what card was still used today? Muster for Battle still see play today in a lot of aggro Flood Paladin decks, mostly because there are a lot of board buffing cards in Paladin and it just works out. But sorry Dr. Boom, you just did not stand the test of time compared to Muster for Battle. You fell off, you old man. So it's been about a year after Hearthstone's initial release, and instead of giving us new cards from a new expansion, we got a single player campaign in Blackrock Mountain. There's only 31 cards in this expansion, but that is more than enough to shake the meta. New archetypes like Dragon decks with Twilight Whelp for Priest, Dragon Consort for Paladin, or just Blackwing Corruptor in general were founded in this meta. Gang Up was also introduced here, and that allowed Millrogue to copy a bunch of Cold Light Oracles, and then you would just mill out your opponent's deck. Even the iconic Grim Patron combo started here, with all the Whirlwinds and the Grim Patrons, and everyone's getting in there. But no card has gotten more upvotes on Hearthstone Reddit than Emperor Thaurissan. At its core, it's a 5-mana 4/4, which is not amazing, but it's not terrible. But it's not about the size, it's about the motion of the effect. And its effect is game changing. At the end of your turn, reducing all the cost of your cards in your hand by 1 means you can create insane combos that you could never before do. And since it happens at the end of your turn, it is guaranteed to activate. There are so many things you could do with this. You could get some Malygos combos, you could get a bunch of charge combos with your minions, you could you could duplicate a Leroy Jenkins and get an OTK with 2 attacks. If you're ever bored, look at 2015 Hearthstone combos and you will most likely see Emperor Thaurissan's effect somewhere in there. Look at all these iconic Hearthstone cards. Undertaker, Muster for Battle, And for Thorsan, I wonder what the next Hearthstone expansion has to offer. Oh no! Many people regard the Grand Tournament to be Hearthstone's first miss of an expansion. The Inspire mechanic wasn't too inspiring, and the cards itself were lackluster in general. There are still some gems in there, but they're just covered by cards like, Gorbak the Impaler! My first thought was Aviana was easily the best card from this expansion. It enables so many combos and is a game changer for Druid. But there are a few problems with that. Aviana was really only good with Kun the Forgotten King, which came out a year later, and most of Aviana's combos were in Wild or at the later half of its lifespan. So a more consistently good card from this expansion was Totem Golem. A 2-mana 3/4 is insanely good tempo, especially for mid-range and aggro shaman. It's just so many stats at this time, and it is so hard to remove. Play on turn 2, and most decks cannot remove that 4 health, as we talked about with Undertaker earlier, unless you Shadow Word Paint it. Thank you, Priest. This will also pair really well with Tunnel Trog that is coming up in the next expansion too. That expansion being the League of Explorers. After the disappointment of the Grand Tournament, players were anxious about the future of the game. Are the cards going to be this mediocre again? Will we have to see Gorbak the Impaler again? But all these worries were put away when the League of Explorers expansion came out. Though it was kind of more of a DLC like the Blackrock Mountain, where it's a single player expansion, some of Hearthstone's most iconic cards came out at this time. Sir Finley allowed for aggro decks that were not Hunter to be way more consistent by replacing a subpar hero power with a damage dealing hero power. Another game-changing card was Reno Jackson. You can play this in a Reno Lock or even a Reno Mage, Reno Paladin. There were so many Reno decks at the time because this effect is so good. It would wall out most aggro decks along with a few removal cards, maybe some taunts, and you are looking golden. Cursed Blade became a meme. Yeah, but there was nothing compared to the power shift of Battlecry cards by Brand's Bronzebeard. This card is just a combo enabler. You want healing? You got Refreshment Vendor. Board removal? Mind Control Tech. Stupid bullshit. Cold Light Oracle, what we talked about earlier. Thank you, gang up. You get the point. If there is a Battlecry card with a decent effect, it becomes a great card when paired with Bran Bronzebeard. Later on, you get cards like Kazakus, which give you so much value when paired with Bran. A 3-mana 2/4 isn't great, but when you're playing this on turn 3, you can remove a bunch of 2 health minions, and that's what you want to do, because Bran's not going to be good when you're playing against an aggro deck. You got to just plop him on the board, and you're fine. In every meta from here, you got to be looking at Battlecry cards, because Bran's Bronzebeard immediately makes all of those cards better. Continuing with the trend of absolutely banger expansions, we have the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion. This was when I was first getting into Hearthstone, and there are so many iconic cards here as well. Of course, you get the 4-mana 7/7, which I actually don't remember the name of, but that was a meme. You play that on turn 4, or even coin it on turn 3, and you need to play Polymorph or Hex on it. If you don't, you're just taking 7 damage, it's brutal, you hate it. Fandral Staghelm was so good in Druid decks. It gave you so much flexibility. You could play that with Raven Idol, you can play that with Living Roots, you would most likely play that with Nourish, but the point is, look at all those different effects you could get in combination with Fandral. But how could I forget the Old Gods? There's Yashiraj, which is a meme card, but it's funny. Cthulhu was all the rage, and there was entire decks around building the boss monster. N'Zoth was widely used to as an amazing win condition and board swing, but let's be real. The best card in Hearthstone from this expansion literally started a cult. Yogg-Saron Hope's End. What this card basically does is at the end of a game, if you're playing a slower deck, you just play Yogg and you spin a wheel and you hope you win. Not only is it a funny card to play, seriously, look at how many Yogg clips there are on YouTube, but there is so many classes you could play this card in. The most famous one was Druid. You play that in some Malygos Druid decks or even just spell-based Druid decks, but you could also play that in Mage or even control decks like Warrior. As long as you play spells in your deck, you should play Yogg-Saron in that deck because it is so good. If you look on average from every spell in Hearthstone, even if it is random, it is most likely going to benefit you. Things like secrets, card draws, board clears, the ones that doesn't remove Yogg, those all help you. And the ones that just deal direct damage, that's just random. But on average, you're getting a good effect with Yogg. You can single-handedly win games with this card. It is that good. Or it could single-handedly lose you games. But if you're already winning, just don't play Yogg, and if you're already losing, you already lost, Yogg didn't matter. The One Night in Karazhan expansion was also great, even though it was kinda tiny. Like League of Explorers and Blackrock Mountain, we have another small expansion with a single-player mode. Barrens was paired with Yashiraj for the Ancient one, but let's be real, It sucks. There is Spirit Claws and Shaman, which is great because at the hero power, you can get spell damage. Seriously, when you make your opponent remove the 0/2 spell damage totem, that is a problem. You got Enchanted Raven, the first 1 mana 2/2 card. Everyone was losing their mind about this card. They weren't losing their mind, but everyone was like, wow, this card is strong. And yeah, it is strong. The Babbling Book is famous. It's a 1 mana 1/1 tempo card, and there is even a meme about it. Thank you, Pavel, for giving us Babbling Book, which wins us games. But here's the thing though. None of these are really the best card. They're great cards, but are they really the best card? So if I have to choose one, I'd say Malchezaar's Imp. Nope, I'm gonna lie, it's gonna be Swashbuckler. Malchezaar's Imp is great. It makes up for the weakness of Discard Warlock, where you lose your cards and you can't draw them back, but Swashbuckler is so much better. It's a 1 mana 1/1 draw a card, kind of like Babbling Book, but it's useful in so many more rogue archetypes. It's gonna be useful in the Caverns Below quest, which we'll talk about later, but it's also used in any Thief rogue decks. You can Shadow Step it for combos with Edwin Van Cleef and other cards, and it's a good Shadow Step target too because it's free when you Shadow Step it and it gives you a card. It's just great in so many decks and it's still relevant today. It's 2016. The Last Guardian finally gets released after years of waiting. You play it. It sucks. You turn to crime. After messing with the most brutal cartels in the world, you finally arrive at Gadgetzan and find 3 crime families feeding for your attention. You're honored. You haven't gotten attention from anyone in years. You're missing the feeling of having someone love you. Do you turn to the grimy goons, the Cabal, or the Jade Lotus? Only one of these clans will have the best card. What? You're telling me the best card in this expansion was neutral? It didn't even have any of the mechanics of the expansion? Man, my voice doesn't even go that low. What are we doing? Aya Blackpaw. Great card. You played an Aggro Shaman, you played in Jade Druid, good tempo, Panda. Kazakus, a great card. You'd play it in Renal Lock, you'd play it in Highlander Mage, amazing card, good value, Drug Addicts. Don Honcho, mediocre card. You'd played in Hamfa Paladin, but it wasn't really that good, let's be real. Disfiguration. But nothing was as game-breaking as Patches the Pirate. You get this out of your deck on turn 1, it deals 1 damage, whatever, that's nothing. You're probably not going to be able to remove it on turn 1, so it deals 2 damage by turn 2. And if you can't remove it by turn 2, it deals 3 damage, and this free card just dealt 3 damage to your opponent for nothing. Not only that, it thins out your deck, which makes your deck better, and it is so versatile in so many different decks. You play this in Aggro Shaman, you play this in Pirate Warrior, you play this in Token Druid, you play this in Zoo Warlock, you play this in even some control decks. If you play this against an aggro deck when you're playing a control deck, your patches will be able to remove their patches. Do you see how many layers there are here? That's how good patch it is. It's not even good at just aggro, it's good at stopping aggro too. It got nerfed so hard, they had to change its voice line. Its voice line! I'm in charge now. Removing charge from patches lessened the damage and the pun. Still a good card without charge, but not as good as it was before, of course. You might have noticed, starting in the last few expansions, we've had some wonky game mechanics. We've got some tri-class cards from Mean Streets and Gadgetzan, and in Journey to Angora, we finally get quests. If you play Wild, you know that Open the Waygate has caused so many controversies over the last few years, but that's mostly in Wild. At release, it was okay. It was too slow to be a tier 1 or 2 deck, because we all know the solution to slow, uninteractive decks is to just play an aggro deck, right? That's the problem. We should all just play aggro decks. I'm talking to you, Hearthstone subreddit. The last Kaleidosaur had a song named after it, sung by Brian Kibler's wife. That's kind of weird. But there were better cards that were not quests. Vilespine Slayer is such a good card. Rogues can remove minions, but it's not the most consistent thing. So let's give them a consistent removal and a board presence with it. Firefly was such a good piece. You play it as a 1 mana 1/2 and you can get another 1 mana 1/2, great for token decks, great for certain aggro decks, and great for elemental decks. But there is one card so broken at release. I think this card was the earliest a card had ever been nerfed in the history of the game so far. The Caverns Below. It's easy, you gotta just play 4 minions of the same name. Or in other words, Firefly, Shadow Step, Firefly, Shadow Step, Firefly, maybe Youthful Brewmaster or something, or maybe you play the second Firefly in your deck and boom, quest done. Preparation, every minion you play is a 5/5 on turn 4. No class can deal with that. I am sorry, every other class, you will just lose to this deck. And you have the flame elementals you can just plop on the board too. Oh yeah, this deck also plays patches. The problem with this card is that there is no good balance of nerfing it. You make the minions 4/4 and they're not as good anymore. You make it so you play 5 minions, which is actually what they did. That is way too hard to pull off. And the reward for being 5/5 is not that good with the 5 minions instead of the 4. So after this card destroyed the metagame for a while after its release, they finally nerfed it, and it still saw some play. But we will never forget that first few weeks of Journey to Un'Goro where this card just destroyed every single deck it played against. Continuing with the theme of the Hearthstone devs kind of experimenting a bit, the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion gave one of the biggest power jumps in Hearthstone's history. Every hero card was at least good to busted in this expansion. Valyria the Hollow was insane. You could literally get 2 copies of any card you played, and that was just free. 2 Vilespine Slayers for 2 board removals, 2 Swashbucklers for 2 card draws. It's crazy. Shadow Reaper Anduin was so good. It's an instant board removal basically for anything that really mattered. There was an OTK eventually with cards like Raza the Enchained and Prophet Valen for enabling the machine gun. Malfurion and Garrosh just gave so much armor or so much value with Garrosh's weapon being able to do the whirlwind damage every turn, and Malfurion with being able to get 3 health or 3 attack every turn, and not to mention the 2 poisonous minions on play. And Blood Reaver Gul'dan gave us levels of win condition that eclipse N'Zoth. You play Blood Reaver Gul'dan, all your demons resurrect, and your hero power not only deals damage, but it heals you. So the best card from this expansion has to be one of these hero cards, right? They somehow eclipse the power of Blood Reaver Gul'dan. Famous Hearthstone YouTuber Trump SC says in his nightmare scenario, if Prince Kaliseth is run in a deck that wins 50% of the time, and you play him on turn 2 and win, let's say, 75% of the time, the deck becomes good, and it's solely good because you played Kaliseth on turn 2, even though that would only happen about 20% of the time. That 25% of the time you win of the 75% makes the deck good. In other words, simply playing Kaliseth by itself makes a deck good. If you play this card on turn 2, which is about a 25% chance if you mulligan right, your average deck becomes the best deck in the game, and you are most likely going to win. That is how insanely good this card was. What makes it worse is if you're playing Rogue, why not just play Kaliseth and then Shadow Step it back, and then play it again, and Shadow Step it back, and then play it again, and your entire deck has +3/+3. Yes, not playing any 2-drops in your deck besides this is a big sacrifice, but it is well worth it with how much benefit you can get from just playing this card. So, after the nightmare of the Knights of the Frozen Throne expansion, the Kobolds and Catacombs expansion gave us some less powerful cards. Until the next expansion after it, where most of the cards became extremely strong. Murmuring Elemental enabled Shudderwalk, Grumble World Shaker enabled Shudderwalk, and Zola the Gorgon enabled, you guessed it, Gormok the Impaler. But I've never seen a card's stats be changed so drastically as Corridor Creepers. Everyone said this card was trash. Oh, 7 mana is too high for cards in an aggro deck.
Seems unlikely I'm going to give it 1 star.
Corridor Creeper used to be a 7 mana 5/5, which cost 1 less whenever a minion dies while this is in your hand. Which means in a lot of aggro decks, if your board is empty, 10/10 on the board. It's useful in zoo, it's useful in aggro, it's useful for anything that plays minions. In particular, you could play this in Odd Paladin, and because the hero power gives you 2 1/1s, Corridor Creeper is so good there. Also, it technically does cost 7 mana, which means you can evolve it for a random 8 mana minion. They realized this was way too strong, and then it got nerfed to a 2/5. To my knowledge, this is the biggest stat line nerf in Hearthstone history. If you thought Kobolds and Catacombs was kind of underwhelming in terms of power, you might be sort of right. You know what, so in order to make up for it, they released the Witchwood. The thing about the Witchwood is the average card from this expansion is not very good. Oh no, my opponent played Spellshifter. But the good cards in this expansion, they were busted. You've got Baku the Moon Eater and Glenn Greymane pioneering odd and even decks. Specifically, Baku was great with odd aggro decks like Odd Paladin and Odd Hunter, and as I mentioned before, Corridor Creepers in that deck. The even decks with Glenn was not as popular. You did have some handlocks though, which gave some big buffs, and that 1 mana hero power was really big. This is where Test Greymane also got first released. If you play a Thief Road deck, you want to play your Test Greymane, but none of these cards broke the game as much as, you guessed it, Shudderwalk. Let's look at everything Shudderwalk can do. It can copy itself on the board with Serenite Chain Gang. It can add itself back to your own hand using Zola the Gorgon. It can deal face damage and heal with Life Drinker. It can remove boards with Grumble World Shaker. It can freeze your opponent using Glacial Shard. The card's animation can go so long that it would cut into your opponent's turn, and they had to nerf this card so much, and it was still good. Even today, you can see Shudderwalk decks in Wild. Shudderwalk is just such a broken and insanely good card. Once you played Shudderwalk, the game was practically over. So Shudderwalk and his nature monstrosity destroyed the game for a bit. So how do we combat nature? Industrialization, baby! Woo! Yeah, I love pollution! Mechs, 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 mechs! The Boomsday project did a 180 twist on the whole nature aspect of the Witchwood by giving us amazing mech cards. Dr. Boom Mad Genius was the face of this expansion. It gave warriors amazing late game win conditions. You could flip the hero power every turn and all the hero powers gave you so much value, and your mechs having rush also allowed for you to clear the boards easier. Mechathune decks popped up here and there, but it's more of a wild thing now, so we don't care about it. Maestro's Unstable Element was really fun in aggro rogue decks. Pogo Hopper existed, that was fun, I guess. But in terms of great neutral legendary cards that can be put into any deck, Ziliax dominates that category. At 5 mana, it's a 3/2 and it has all these effects, but it's really just a decent board removal. You play this on turn 5 and it can remove most minions. Since it has taunt, it can probably get attacked into twice, so it heals you for about 6. As an added bonus, you can also magnetize this card, but you're probably not doing that. You can play it in so many decks. You play it in that Control Warrior deck from before. It's really one of those cards you just kind of put in anything. Very versatile, can be used in almost every deck. It's not the most busted card, but it is used so much that it has to take this spot. So we are going from one of the best cards in Hearthstone's history to Rastakhan's Rumble. I will be honest with you, I know I played a lot in this expansion. I do not remember most things that happened in this expansion. It's widely considered to be one of the weakest expansions power-wise, and you'll see why. Springpaw was an amazing tempo piece, especially when combined with Headhunter's Hatchet in a Face Hunter deck, but it's nothing game-changing. Lickum was a 1-mana potentially deal 9 damage, but being overloaded for 3 turns kinda sucks. Again, not game-changing. Shirvala the Tiger. It was used in some OTK decks with Holy Wrath, but it was a jank play card. It was more of a meme. Most of the time, it was better just to play Odd Paladin, which coincidentally didn't have many cards from this expansion. So the most impactful card in this expansion was honestly nothing. So let's just randomly pick one, and Zul'jin, woo! Zul'jin was used in a Spell Secret Hunter, and admittedly, this deck was pretty good. You play a bunch of secrets, you play cards like To My Side and Lesser Emerald Spellstone, and it's just so much value from spells. Wandering Monster was also a secret at this time, and it was so good. It's a huge swing whenever you play it. You get all your wolves, you get all your animal companions, you get all your secrets up, and that 2 damage hero power is so good for just controlling the board or just dealing general damage. There's one problem though, and it's that this card did not last very long. The Spell Hunter support fell off after this expansion, and therefore this card also fell off. But at one time, it was one of the best win conditions for this expansion. With Rastakhan's Rumble and going into the Rise of Shadows expansion, we are at this sort of rebalancing portion of Hearthstone's history. So I'm gonna warn you, there are no cards here that are going to scare you. See, it's not that scary. Archmage Vargroth had such a great effect for Token Druid decks and Resurrect Priest decks. You play it, you get your Mass Resurrection, you get your Forest Aid, it's over. Underbelly Fence saw some play in Thief Rogue with cards like Blink Fox and Hench Clan Burglar. Again, a 2-mana 3/4 with Rush is really good at removing minions. You can also play Khadgar with Conjurer's Calling, and you get some stupid combos with, who guessed it, Quarter Creeper. But it's more of just any card really. But there is one card if you were playing a Control v Control deck that you would just lose if you did not have this card in your deck. That card's Archivist Elysiana. It's simple, all it does is replace your deck with 10 other cards. But the thing is, it beats Fatigue. If your opponent plays this and you play the second, you are winning the Fatigue battle. And it's also kind of random depending on the cards you get. Sometimes the rest of your deck isn't that good and you play this early in hopes of getting better cards too. And the stats are pretty decent. It's a high statted minion, you kind of have to remove it. Again, nothing game changing, but it's game changing enough in control matchups where it gets this spot. Again, I played in Saviors of Uldum. Don't remember much about it. A lot of neutral cards are good here. Cartooth Defender and Siamat were flexible options you can put in either your control decks, maybe some control priest, you get some healing out of it, maybe some warrior you want to heal. Beaming Sidekick and Kobold Sandtrooper were both very good cards in aggro decks. For Beaming Sidekick, you can put this in your hunter decks, and that's really good for keeping your minions alive. And Kobold Sandtrooper, same thing, hunter decks, a lot of damage early on. 3 damage is a lot to the face at this time still. Again, none of these cards were that great, except for Zephyrus. This card literally will give you the best card at any time. How can you beat that? The card is just the best card. You need lethal, you want a board clear, a card draw, mana ramp. This card, you play it, you get it. It's probably one of the main reasons why Highlander decks were actually good at this time. Reno the Relicologist was not helping anything here. It was all Zephyrus. So far, it's been 2 expansions worth of relatively tame and balanced cards. Then the Scent of Dragons came out, and for the first month, everything was on fire. Galakrond was a free legendary, and it gave certain classes the ability to use the Galakrond hero card in their deck. Each class had a different Galakrond hero card, and you could play it and get some different effects. You could also play cards with the invoke mechanic, which would make Galakrond stronger, and it would activate its hero power, giving you some value. This means if you're playing Shaman on turn 7, you can get 2 8/8 rush minions when you play the Galakrond hero card. And you can repeat this with Shudderwalk. We've already talked about Shudderwalk, so we don't have to re-mention it, but that was one busted deck. Rogue could use Necrium Apothecary to combo with Mechanical Whelp, or that card I'm not going to try to pronounce, for some stupid temple plays or some value for your deck. Also, Pirate Warrior was doing Pirate Warrior things. You got Anchor and stuff like that. Just a lot of damage for that aggro deck. There's a lot of good cards that were specifically useful in this expansion, but I will be honest, they did not have as lasting as an effect as Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Dragon Queen Alexstrasza was another staple in Highlander decks along with Zephyrus. Easy card generation. You play this, you just get cards. It is really hard to mess up playing this card, especially when you get dragons for free. Eventually, it was nerfed because it was too good, and now your dragons will cost 1 instead of 0. So instead of having this huge board swing on turn 9, you would have a moderate board swing on turn 10. If you got lucky, you could single-handedly win games based on Dragon Queen Alexstrasza's pulls. It was used in every Highlander deck, and I'm pretty sure this card is the reason why cards that generate random cards cannot discover or get themselves. So a card that changes how randomness works in Hearthstone, I think that deserves a spot as one of the best cards. With the Scent of Dragons, we got the Galakrond's Awakening single player mode. As you probably know by now, I'm counting single player expansions as separate sets. This single player mode is the one that made me not want to do that. The best cards here are pretty mediocre at best. Rottenness Drake was seen in Dragon Hunters for a big stat line and a decent effect. The Amazing Reno could be played in Mage, but honestly, it's a 10 mana board clear that doesn't do anything after that, except feed your gambling addiction, I guess. Everything else is not that good. The most consistently played card from this mode was actually Air Raid. It's a 2 mana tempo piece. Sure, it's just basically 2 Baku hero powers, but it's still tempo. You play it in Mech Paladin, it's good for wide boards. Nothing besides that is spectacular, but it is the best card from this little single player mode. So you know what, you get your time in the spotlight. And who would have guessed that after Galakrond's Awakening is another single player mode in the Demon Hunter Initiate. Unlike Galakrond's Awakening, these cards were busted. Mana burn is annoying. It's a 1 mana, your opponent can't do anything next turn. So if you're playing against an aggro deck, you play this on turn 2 or whatever, their entire board is gone and you have the aggro advantage because you have more minions because you had more mana. I don't like mana burn, as you can tell. I-Beam is a solid and cheap removal, with lifesteal being really nice for the demon hunters who like to hit themselves for some reason. Twin Slice got nerfed, but it's kind of more of a retool, and we'll talk about that in the next expansion. It used to be 0 mana, get 1 attack, and then you get another second slice that gives 1 attack. After that card got retooled, it was still good, being a 1 mana give your hero +2 attack, that gave a 1 mana give your hero +2 attack card in second slice. But a card that I think that stood the test of time better was Battle Fiend. Battle Fiend scales hard, partly because Battle Fiend itself is good, but also because Battle Fiend has a lot of synergy with Demon Hunter cards. Demon Hunters need 1 mana for their hero power, and their hero power is just attacking something. If your opponent can't remove this, it deals 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. The damage scales so hard. While it was in standard, it was a must put in. You could argue that Twin Slice was more impactful, and we'll see why in the Ashes of Outlands expansion. Hey, we haven't really seen an overpowered class in a while. It's Demon Hunter on release! Oh! The Ashes of Outlands expansion was not the most balanced across classes, to say the least. You've got previous Demon Hunter Initiate cards, what we just talked about, plus insanely strong cards like Crimson Sigil Runner, which just is a 1 mana 1/1, draws you a card, and Metamorphosis, which used to cost 5 mana, but still it was 10 damage to the face. Kane's Sun Fury was so cheesy because it ignored taunt, and a lot of Demon Hunter decks at this time just wanted to go face. Its stat line is decent enough for you to just play it on turn 4 sometimes too. And to top this aggro Demon Hunter deck off, you have Skull of Gul'dan, which used to cost 5 mana. It's an easy hand refill. You play this with Outcast, and then you just draw the cards, and you can probably play those cards right away. Even after its nerf when it cost 6 mana, it still saw play. Another honorable mention to Hand of Adal. It's a 2 mana +2/+2 buff. It got nerfed to a +2/+1 buff. Draws you a card, great in Libra Paladin, Pure Paladin. Basically any deck that plays a minion on turn 1, you can play Hand of Adal in. But the card that tied the Demon Hunter domination altogether was Kael'thas Sunstrider. Let's pair this with 0 mana Twin Slice. I think this is the reason why Twin Slice got nerfed. It wasn't because Twin Slice was good at 0 mana. It was because Kael'thas enabled 0 mana cards to be really good. If you play Twin Slice at 0 mana, you can activate a card called Inner Demon for 8 damage for free with Kael'thas. If you have 2 Inner Demons and 2 Twin Slices in your hand, You can deal 20 damage just by playing Kael'thas on turn 6. Even though a 6 mana 4/7 isn't that good, that every third spell you cast costs 0 is such a good effect. It enabled Inner Demon Hunter to get some insane combos going. And if you remember, Kain cost 4 mana. You could play this on turn 10. You get 23 damage to the face at least with the Kain combo. It was later nerfed to 8 mana, and then also later nerfed that every third spell it cost 1 instead of 0. It was crazy. So those were some pretty easy picks, but starting with Scholomance Academies, we run into the problem that there is no standout best card for the next few expansions. Druid had some strong decks. You've got Guardian Animals, and then you play that with Twilight Runner and Teacher's Pet. You can draw cards, you have a taunt minion on the board, and then after you can play Survival of the Fittest to buff everything. Again, none of these cards outstanding by themselves. First Day of School, a 0 mana get 1 cost minion card. Great for Paladin cards. You want to play this on turn 1? Remember Hand of a Doll? You can play that on turn 2. You got a bunch of big statted minions and you drew a card. Again though, not an outstanding broken card by itself. Honorable mention to some neutral cards, Intrepid Initiate and Tour Guide, both 1-cost cards that gave aggro decks some consistency. Either get a hero power for free, Tour Guide can even be good in control decks, or your Intrepid Initiate gets 3 attack, it effectively becomes a 1 mana 3/2. However, I think there is a card that is low-key busted and no one realized it until it was too late. And that card will be revealed in just a second, but I kinda forgot that secret passage was in this expansion. I was on the Hearthstone Reddit and someone made a post about it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to put that on my list. Secret Passage is simply a 1 mana draw 5 before it was nerfed. I don't need to tell you why that's really good. It got nerfed to a 1 mana draw 4, and of course that is still really good. It was played in pretty much every rogue deck for its entire existence. It's even still played now in Wild. Do I think it's necessarily stronger? If I forgot about the card, then maybe not. But I think it's really hard to tell which one's better, this card or the one ahead of it, because they do really different things. If you think Secret Passage is better than the card I'm about to say, then yeah, you know, I can kind of see it, but I'm on hour 20 and I do not want to do any more voiceovers. Do you understand how much time I took? Anyways, the pick for this expansion is Lightning Bloom pre-nerf. This card used to be you gain 2 mana crystals and overload for 2. So, druids, and technically shamans too, but mostly druids, could ramp so hard with this deck. They nerfed Innervate, a 0 mana, gain 2 mana crystals. They said that card was too strong, and then they printed this card that does the exact same thing. You play this alongside Overgrowth from Ashes of Outlands, and you gain mana crystals, and that overload thing that happened last turn, it doesn't even matter. Guardian Animals cost 7. If you still had your minions on the board, you can play Lightning Bloom into Survival of the Fittest. That is a lot of stats on the board and you are going to get run over. And this card is a nature card and you'll see why that's important later, but you get to see the start of how Druidstone developed with the next few expansions. Here is Madness at the Darkmoon Faire, the expansion that everyone likes, but it is no one's favorite. Again, a lot of strong cards, but no standout busted one. Ticketus is what a lot of people remember from this expansion. It's annoying, your opponent plays it, and then a sixth of your deck is gone. But wait, when you pair it with the new Yashiraj the Defiler card, you can get a copy of Ticketus, and then boom, your opponent plays it, you lose a third of your deck. These cards weren't really played without each other. You can't play Ticketus without Yashiraj and vice versa. Cthulhu and N'Zoth also had some good win conditions, but Cthulhu was kind of slow and you had to play 4 random 5 mana cards and it's just kind of awkward. And basing a deck around N'Zoth is not easy to do. The new Yogg-Saron card was fun, but the power level at this point in the game wasn't as comparable to the old Yogg-Saron card. Il'gynoth gave Soul Demon Hunter some consistency and eventually an OTK, but it got nerfed unfortunately, but it was there in the pro scene. So let's look beyond this meta. This card wasn't amazing when it first came out, but it is another core reason why Druidstone existed for so long. Solar Eclipse. It's a simple effect. It basically doubles the next spell you play, which means you get 2 Cenarian Wards, so you get 10 mana to 8 minions plus 16 armor, or you can play Arbor Up, which means you get 2 4/3s and 2 2/1 minions. Plus everything else on your board gets buffed for +4/+3. You could also pair this with the next card we're going to talk about in the expansion from Forged in the Barrens. I have a soft spot for Forged in the Barrens. It's the expansion where I started making YouTube videos. That's the only soft spot, everything else is hard. This expansion saw the release of Paladin Stone alongside Druidstone. You see a Paladin? Is it a Libram Paladin? Or is it a new Secret Paladin, which is really aggro? You got cards like Sword of the Fallen and Northwatch Commander encouraging some aggressive secret play, then Conviction buffing your entire board for face damage. Conviction used to cost 1 mana and it just basically gave 3 attack, but when you were at 5 mana, it gave 2 minions plus 3 attack, which basically means it was a 1 mana deal 6. And I can't forget about Knight of Anointment. That card was just better Crimson Sigil Runner. It's a 1 mana, draw a card. Maybe you draw a Libram card, maybe you draw a Hand of a Doll. Either way, you can play something something on it on turn 2. And you can't forget the watch posts as well. I know you forgot about them, it's a threat, don't you dare forget about them again! 4 health far watch post was so hard to remove, and every time your opponent drew a card, it just kept delaying your turn. If you play this card against an aggro deck, it ruins all their aggression because they have to remove the far watch post basically. And then you could also play 2 of them. Field Contact helped a rogue do so many combos with the eventual Garrot rogue or just rogue things in general, and you see a trend here. From this expansion alone, a lot of cards were good, even great, but nothing stands out as meta-defying until you fast forward a couple of months and then you got some contenders. Tamsin Rome was insane value for Warlocks. 2 Touch of Denathrism, that is 8 health healed or 6 health when it got nerfed. 2 Tamsin's Phylactery for an OTK effect with the Owl cards, or 2 Siphon Souls, 2 anything basically. That card enabled so many combos, but it was not as game-changing as Celestial Alignment. This card used to be a 7 mana, changed both players' mana crystals to 0. All the cards in both players' hands and deck cost 1. Then it got changed to 8 mana, and then what it is today where it only affects you. The combo would change depending on the expansion, but here are a few examples. You can play Celestial Alignment and then Lady Anacondra, then you would combo it with Nourish for some mana gain, maybe some Solar Eclipse and Cenarian Wards for some combos. Remember Lightning Bloom, that's also a nature spell, it costs 0, gives you +2 mana. You can play it with that card too. Later on, you get cards like Guff, which help you gain mana and draw cards, or you could play Miracle Growth, which is a 1 mana, draw 3 cards, and you get a big body on the board. Like most Druid decks, it gets destroyed by hard aggro, but it completely destroys most control decks. And the worst part, you can play another one of these because it is an epic card. It's a game-changing card, it had to be nerfed twice, everyone hated this card. I don't even know where to start with this one. United in Stormwind. Oh, and United in Stormwind. You gave us so many interesting quest lines. Defend the Dwarven District. As the Hunter player, you want to play spells like Piercing Shot and Aim Shot, where you remove your opponent's minions. And then you would shift into your Gatling Gun phase, where you would use your hero power to hit the face 5 times a turn and you would win. How can you play around it? Don't play minions so they can't deal damage to you? What are you gonna do? You can't do anything about it. There's a reason this deck got like 5 nerfs. Raid the Docks. It's a Pirate Warrior deck, you just play pirates and get some value. But the quest reward gives you infinite value. Sign me up, baby. Play your Harbor Scamp, which draws your Defias Cannoneer, and maybe throw in a Stormwind Freebooter, I don't know, maybe a Whetstone Hatchet. There's a bunch of guaranteed cannonballs to the face, and when you get that quest line reward, oh baby. Captain Rukara gives you the Juggernaut, which basically deals damage all the time to the face. You get a free weapon, which will deal damage, and you should swing with it because you get a new free weapon anyways. And every deck gets Mr. Smite now, which is a pirate. Leroy Jenkins is too uninteractive because all the damage to the face. Let's ban that. But Mr. Smite, who does the exact same thing but is slightly better. Oh, we gotta have that there. We don't discriminate. But we all know what card broke the game when it first came out. Riots on Reddit, children screaming in the streets, the threat of nuclear warfare coming. It's the Demon Seed. What do we get the one big weakness of Warlock and just forget about it? That's what the Demon Seed does. Handlock, aggro, emo kid, warlock, any archetype that does self-damage will love playing the Demon Seed. Every time you take damage on your turn, you get 1 step closer to getting Blightborn Tamsin. It's so linear in its gameplay. You just deal damage to yourself, you use your hero power, you get spells, whatever it is, and then once you play Tamsin, every bit of damage is just put onto your opponent. And it's really hard for your opponent to deal damage to you too. You get your Goldshire Gnolls, your Flesh Giants, your Baron Scavengers, all of these cards benefit you when you take damage or get cards in your hand, and if you run into fatigue, it's okay, you completed the quest line. Every self-damage you do damages the opponent, including fatigue damage. Can you believe the first version of this card only had you take 6 damage and then 7 damage and then 8 damage and then you would get this Tamsin card? This card is crazy, man. I'm happy this card was nerfed into Oblivion and banned in Wild for some time, but still, it was absolutely destructive. It deserved the millions of nerfs it got. I don't know where that anger came from, but either way, we are going from insanely powerful quest lines to insanely powerful hero cards with the Fractured and Alterac Valley expansion. The Lightforged Kyriel is one of the biggest examples. It halves all damage given to you due to the immovable object weapon. You basically need to play Rusted Viper or some sort of weapon removal, or else you will not have a good time against this deck. If you're a spell-focused deck that doesn't play Rusted Viper, you cannot basically win any matchup against it. You also get 2 free damage a turn with the weapon attack, and the Blessing of Queens will help you buff your Mr. Smite for an OTK damage. Drekthar was insanely strong at launch. If your deck had all minions that were 3 cost and below, it just summoned 2 of them. So in other words, maybe a 4 mana 9/9 in stats. Insanely good for aggro decks. It was nerfed immediately, so it only summoned 1 minion. A Wild Paw Null also existed. It was only good because of the Maestra of the Masquerade interaction, where you could get this out for cheap because you were considered a different class. It used to be a 5 mana 4/5, and then they made it into a 5 mana 3/5. It was still a decent card, but it's more about that weird interaction with getting it for cheap. Iron Deep Trog's another powerful card. It was useful in a lot of control decks at the time. You could play it on turn 1, and if your opponent played a spell, let's say you're playing against a paladin and they played Hand of a Doll, you would get another Iron Deep Trog, and that trade actually doesn't work anymore because your Iron Deep Trog is still on the board. It was just good in general, and hey, this card wasn't nerfed. Kazakhstan got nerfed though. People realized if you don't play any minions, you play very little minions, or your only minions are dragons and you play 3 or 4 of them, you just trigger Kazakhstan's effect no matter what. From there, you can create a broken deck with using a bunch of dual cards as your treasures. I'm sure the developers thought, okay, you know, we're gonna make the decks full of dragons, and that's why Kazakhstan's gonna be the boss monster, but the wording of the text didn't really work out. That's why it was nerfed to needing to play 4 dragons. From there, it was still a really good card, but still, you know, the effort's there. And here is the biggest culprit to why I particularly didn't like this era of Hearthstone: Wild Heart Guff. This is hands down the best card from this expansion. It's the reason why Druids became so dominant for a while, and that's because you can get 20 mana. Games would never last until 20 mana because you'd win before that, but you would still get 20 mana. It was insane. Why 20 mana is good is pretty obvious. If you have a 10 mana card, that's usually a big card that happens once per turn, you can play 2 of those big mana cards twice. Scale of Onyxia, twice. Miracle Growth, not twice, but you draw a bunch of cards. You got your Solar Eclipse, and remember what I keep talking about Celestial Alignment, and then you got your Cenarian Ward. The hero power was so good too. You can basically get 2 mana crystals every turn by playing Wild Heart Guff. It allowed for druids to do some combos, you got some Moonbeam combos. Running with the theme of this expansion, this card was also nerfed because 20 mana is too much. What? The nerf made it so it gains an empty mana crystal instead of a full mana crystal when you play it. Wow, I am so mad that they removed that 1 mana crystal on turn 5. I couldn't wait to use that 1 mana crystal on turn 5 when I played this card. Oh my gosh. The nerf didn't really do anything. It was still a busted card. But hey, it's time to relax. We're back at expansions where there's no stupid broken card anymore. Thank you, Voyage to the Sunken City. Since we're in a new year, Voyage to the Sunken City is a bit weaker. Lady Sathendo was a Demon Hunter card. It allowed aggro decks to spam spells, and you would just deal 2 damage to the face, or you would clear some boards too because it attacks the lowest health thing. It was later nerfed to 1 attack, and that almost killed the card, but there were some other things happening with Demon Hunter, which we will get to in a second. School Teacher was also used everywhere. It's easy spell generation. It used to be a 4 mana 5/4, and then they nerfed it to a 4 mana 4/3, and it was still played. The stat lines are still pretty good. The 4 attack on turn 4 is good enough to trade into most minions. Of course, we can't forget about the colossal minions though. Nelly the Great Thresher was so good. It's a top minion and board presence and free value whenever the ship's destroyed. It was played in Control Warrior, and if you're a bit spicy, you can play it in Questline Warrior as well. Krakatoa also gave so many tools for Rogue. It's just a big body on the board. You also get some free trading with the crab claw thingy things that can attack into minions. You also get a 4 attack weapon swing after the minion attacks. It's just really good for dealing damage in general. You can play it in Pirate Rogue, Jackpot Rogue. It's so versatile. Not as busted as Hydralodon though. A huge board presence with a must remove 5/5 body, or else you will just get swarmed by the Hydralodon heads. The 3 ones it summons can trade into minions, and that is so annoying for them to deal with. And the Leviathan is an auto include for most paladin decks. The way it works is pretty simple. You get 2 minions, 1 can dredge, so you choose a card, and 1 draws you the card, and they both have Divine Shield. So whenever you play this and you need to trade into a minion, you probably won't get a second attack because most people remove the Leviathan, but it does take a lot of resources to remove. A bunch of great cards, but nothing as problematic as Multi-Strike. The first Multi-Strike was originally a 1 mana and give your hero +2 attack and can attack an additional enemy minion. It doesn't sound too bad, but when you pair that with Fossil Fanatic, you draw 2 cards. When you pair it with Dread Prison Glaive, all the damage you just did to that minion also damages your opponent. When you pair it with Battleworn Vanguard, there are now 4 1/1 minions on your board. This enabled so many different combos, and it does so much damage for Demon Hunter. It was in the same deck as Lady Sathendo of the aggro Demon Hunter. It could just dish out so much damage with all the combo. It it enabled so many things. Even when it did get nerfed, it still saw play as a 2 mana get +2 attack and then Wind Fury basically. I still don't know who or what got murdered at Castle Nathria. You'll start noticing it's around this time in Hearthstone's history where a bunch of big win conditions just get printed. For example, the Countess. It's a pretty easy condition to achieve for Paladin. Everyone plays pure Paladin at this time. Having no neutral cards does not mean anything for Paladins anymore. You get 3 big effect minions for 2 mana each, and it is crazy good for board swings. You can play this in slower Paladin decks, but some aggro Paladins would even play it as a last resort win condition. That is how versatile this card was. There's also Topier the Shrebigazer, 7 mana, infinite value card. Druids aren't very good at removing boards, but this card makes up for it. You would play this in Nature Druid, maybe some combos with Kathos, and you would get some stupid value with Guff. Oh my gosh, I hate that card so much. You just keep getting 3/3s and they just keep attacking into everything, and it's good board presence too, and the 3/3s just refill so easily. But if you wanted to stop either of these cards, you could play Theotar the Mad Duke. It was played in a lot of control decks, not really a specific deck. Even though it says swap cards, what it can really do is just to win you the game in some cases. The stats itself doesn't matter, the effect is what matters. It used to be a 4 mana card, and on turn 4, you can win the game if you get a correct switch. It was later changed to 5 and then 6 mana, but it was a very notable tech card. Here was the rise of Imp Warlock. At the beginning, it was way too strong. Vile Library was a huge board buffer in combination with Wicked Shipment and Mischievous Imp, and Impending Catastrophe was also an easy hand refill. All of these powerful cards, all of these powerful decks, but what did all of these have in common? A card so good that they had to murder it at Castle Nathria. Literally. Sire Nathrius. 10 mana card, every time a minion dies, or in other words, infuse 1, you get +1 damage for its battle cry, which deals a lifesteal 1 damage to a random enemy. In Zoo or aggro decks, you can potentially run this card for an endgame burst. But control decks, this is where this card shined. You have this in your opening hand, you remove their minions, and on turn 10, it's not only a board clear, it's not only a big body, but it also heals you up. Everyone knew this card was coming. You would have to win before Sire Nathrius comes out. If you play this card against an aggro deck, you win. Unless it's Questline Warrior. In that case, they have infinite value, but you still probably win. It got nerfed to Infuse 2, what it is today, and at Infuse 2, it was still used a lot, but it is nothing compared to the powerhouse and meta changer Sire Nathrius had at Infuse 1. At this point in time, Hearthstone stopped releasing solo adventures as well, and they just kind of released DLC packs for certain classes. The Path of Arthas miniset just came in combination with the Lich King. It just gave them some more cards because they were kind of not existent the year before. It's hard to rate the best card here because the cards are all stupid good. Marrow Manipulator, Bonebreaker, the Horn of Winter, all used in aggro Death Knights, more specifically Frost Death Knight at the time. Recently, Malignant Horror and Corpse Bride have been used in Rainbow Death Knight decks as corpse activators. You can activate your Corpse Giants, you can activate your Climactic Necrotic Explosions. So do I value the past or the present more in terms of which card is best? Well, there is a card here which fundamentally changed how rune mechanics work in Hearthstone, so I think I have to give it its respect. Frostworm's Fury. It's a 7 mana card, frees the whole board, deals 5 damage, summon a 5/5. Nothing insanely strong, but you have to remember, you can repeatedly discover this card. You get stuff like Frost Strike or Nerubian Visor, stuff like that. You can just constantly freeze your opponent and keep dealing 5 damage, and your opponent also has to deal with the 5/5 minions on your board. Because of this card, 3 rune cards can no longer be discovered by Death Knights. Or in general, I should say. I think Frostworm's Fury has to have some sort of respect here. Adding to the Death Knight domination, we have March of the Lich King. This expansion saw the Scourge come into Hearthstone, and fittingly, this expansion makes me want to die. Alexandros Mograine officially puts timers on the board. It deals 3 damage each. Wait, you can copy its effect with Brandon Zola? Okay, well it deals 6 to 12 damage each turn, and there is no way you can stop it. Construct Hoarder was a seemingly harmless location until you realize that the Death Knight hero power summons an undead minion. So it becomes a 2 mana 4/5 rush every other turn. It got nerfed twice, costing 4 mana and then only having 2 durability, but it still gets a contender for one of the best cards of this expansion to date. Thaddeus Monstrosity was also there, how could I forget you? You can cheat this out with the most famous example being with Amorphous Slime and Shallow Grave, and then you would get a million of these things and they would just keep coming back, and then after it gets removed from the board, you play Infantry Reanimator. Another Thaddeus, another bad time. Naturally, the card got nerfed because having cards cost 0 on turn 5 is not very good, and that's why now the text is so bad. I mean, your odd cost cards are Gormok the Impaler? What could be worse than that? But by far, the best card from this expansion, and the most influential, was Astalar Bloodsworn. By itself, any deck would want to run an Astalar. It's some good value. You get some early board clear, you get some armor gain, and you can do some really stupid stuff with this card if you're playing Rogue. First of all, you can Shadow Step this with Rogue, so you just keep dealing a bunch of 16 damage. But maybe you don't feel like waiting that long for Shadow Step. So why don't you just Shadow Step the 2 mana Astler so you get the 5 mana Astler and the 2 mana Astler back in your hand so you can play it again and get another 5 mana Astler. But if you play, I don't know, maybe Brand's Bronzebeard with the Shadow Step, you deal 8 damage, and then 8 more, 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 and then... It's a combination of Rogue being jank and this card being really good. Even after it got nerfed, having the mana thirst of the first form of Astler being 5, and then the damage at the end being less, getting nerfed to 14 instead of 16, the card is just such a good value card. It's useful in so many decks, an utterly game-changing card. With the Festival of Legends expansion, we are at the start of the Year of the Wolf, meaning again, most of the cards are less powerful because of the standard rotation and all. For the most part, that's true. A lot of the cards in this expansion are weak, until a year later, and now all of them are busted. At the time of this expansion's release, there was definitely some favoritism going on. Hunter had Bunch of Bananas and Barrel of Monkeys. You could play this in Hybrid Hunter, which was a combination of spells and minions. You would play all the spells, and then you would just get big boards. This expansion also gave us Costume Singer and Hidden Meaning, 2 very essential cards in any Secret Hunter deck. And Hollow Hound is in this expansion too, which is more of a Death Knight card, but it is still a very good healing option. Warlocks got their whole pain mechanic going. Blood Treant, Baritone Imp, Crazed Conductor, Crescendo, all from here. You're thinking Pain Warlock, all of these stupid aggressive cards. You combine that now with Imprisoned Horror and Infernal, it is a very powerful class. Warriors got their Rift cards, which are great in mid-rangey control warriors, and Rogues got a second Shadow Step in Breakdance, because apparently that regular one wasn't good enough. But there's one class this expansion which dominated the meta. It was Paladin Stone all over again. There was pre-nerf Disco Maul. You play this on turn 2 and it can give +10/+10 in stats if you play it with Sinful Sooth Chef and stuff like that. And it's hard to remove with Rustrat Viper because whenever you do remove it, it just buffs one of their minions. The first aggro Paladin decks from this expansion played Funkfin and Jitterbug, and then people realized that Boogie Down is a stupidly good card. Boogie Down is by far the best card from this expansion. Summoning 2 1-cost minions from your deck doesn't sound too good, but there are some things which make this card sneakily broken. First, the taunt from the finale. You don't really need to play this as a finale to get the taunt, but do you remember Disco Maul? Attack with the Disco Maul and then you play Boogie Down. Now there are 2 taunt minions on the board, plus whatever buff you gave from the Disco Maul. You could also combo Boogie Down with Blood Matriarch Liadrin for Divine Shield and Rush. Boogie Down also filters 1-cost minions from your deck, making your deck better. But after a bunch of complaining here and there, it got nerfed to the 4-mana variant we have today, where the finale it summons 3 1-cost minions instead of 2. And it is still seen play today. Cards like Crusader's Aura just synergizes so well with it, making it such a viable card for the next years to come. Here's a disclaimer moving on, every card from here on out has been released for less than a year at the time I'm making this video, so if you're watching in the future and you're telling me that Serenite Tolvir was integral to a priest deck I should have known about, my bad! The Titans expansion is of course known for their Titans, but there are some notable cards. Helya is the reason why Plague Death Knight wins in control matchups. Infinite damage, slow and annoying, simple as that. Ignis the Eternal Flame is a must put in a lot of control decks. The weapons you get are so good. The summoning 8-cost minions or gaining armor from the 10-mana weapon, or the full board clear you can get with the 1-cost minion and the poisonous and attack adjacent minions. Those are some very good cards, very flexible, and very easy to get from the Ignis ability, only requiring you to forge 1 card. The Titans though, Amidus the Peacekeeper, capable of walling out minion-based decks by its ability of only being able to take 2 damage at a time. The abilities of the Titan are also so good. You can buff your board, you can have a board clear with the making your opponent's board 2/2s, or you can just draw cards. The Primus is also so versatile. It heals while doing a board clear, it summons minions, and it gives some spell damage for some conditional wins, all with a big body to boot. The best Titan is obvious though. Yogg-Saron Unleashed. The old text was cost 1 less for each spell you played this game, meaning there is a very high possibility that you can get this card for free and then copy it with cards like, I don't know, Breakdance that just got released, Shadow Step. In any other class, you have Zola the Gorgon, you can just play that one after another. You could just keep spamming this card out. It was stupid before it got nerfed. It comes with a free board clear, it can control an enemy minion, and the tendrils are funny. Yeah, and so the new text is now it's a 9-mana Titan and it casts 2 random spells whenever an ability is used. As we mentioned before, random spells usually benefit you. Even in its post-nerf state, it is still an auto put in a lot of slower decks. Showdown at the Badlands, you know, the cowboy one? Ready for a fair duel at noon? you better not be ready because a lot of these cards are not fair. Deep Miner Brand, probably one of the first cards people think of. It used to be a 6 mana 2/4, now it's an 8 mana 2/4. An 8 mana 2/4 sees play. That is how good the effect is. It's like Old Brand, except you do not have to play that 3 mana price to activate its Battlecry combo potential. You just play it, your Battlecries trigger twice the rest of the game. I don't need to say why this card is good. You just play this and all your Battlecries activate twice. It's over whenever you play this card. Boomboss Thogrin, and you pair it with Bran, you can destroy 18 cards. 18! These TNTs destroying everything in your deck, hand, and board are just so annoying to play against, and you cannot do anything to win against it except beating it before they have a chance to play it. Crazy thing though is that Boomboss Thogrin isn't even good by itself. You need to play Deep Miner Brand with it. Reska the Pit Boss is basically Sylvanas, where it takes control of a random enemy minion, except you get to be more selective about who you get. You get a trade, kind of a board clear-esque effect, and you steal one of their minions. But let's be real, the best card in this expansion is Reno Lone Ranger. It's originally an 8 mana card. It's an 8 mana board clear, which restricts your opponent's board for 1 turn, so you can only play 1 thing. So it's kind of like an 8 mana board clear for 2 turns. The hero power generates so much value, it applies decent pressure, it gets you some cards, some card draw, buffs your board sometimes, and it is played in everything. If this card doesn't exist, no one's playing Highlander decks, hands down. I'm waiting for this card to be changed again. It's been nerfed twice, but I have a feeling people will be complaining about this for a long time. At the time of making this video, Whizbang's Workshop is the current expansion, but I can still see the future, so let's see what cards will be relevant in the next 2 years. Puppet Theater makes Control Priest viable, because even if Priest doesn't have any good cards, you can just copy your opponent's good cards. If you play this on one of your opponent's win conditions, you get your own win conditions plus your opponent's win conditions. Mass Reduction's a great Zulok card, a 1 mana draw 2. And since Warlocks like dealing self-damage now, with cards like Imprisoned Horror and Molten Giant, this card will be great in refilling that hand and activating some of your abilities. Inventor Boom's a great win condition for big mechs, but the only reason why Inventor Boom is so good right now is because of the easily best card from this expansion, Ziliak Stellax 3000. It is literally anything you want. A big board clear and heal, big statted minion, a board buffer. It fits in every deck and it is good in almost every deck. I cannot go through every deck that this card is played in. It is played in literally everything. Okay, after all this, I need a vacation. Wait a minute. The next expansion is Perils in Paradise. When I made this video, this expansion has not released though yet, so let's just take a guess and New Heights. That's the best card from this expansion. Guff is stupid, going above 10 mana is stupid, this card's stupid. Let's go through the overall ratings of every single card now. Which expansion has the best card? Starting with number 34, Air Raid. This card's really just happy to be here. It is nothing compared to the other cards in this list. Number 33, Zul'jin. It was good for 1 expansion and then it fell off because it had no other support. You're a great win condition, Zul'jin, but unfortunately, you just did not have any help. Number 32, Battle Fiend. It fell off over time and it wasn't as good, but when it was good, it was such a threat to deal with. Number 31, Frostworm's Fury. Frost Death Knight was such a good deck, but it was more a combination of a bunch of good cards rather than one card carrying that deck. Number 30, Kael'thas Sunstrider. This card enabled the Inner Demon Hunter OTKs to work. It was the reason why Inner Demon Hunter was so dominant for so long, and it got nerfed to the ground. So unfortunately, Kael'thas, you have to be a kind of lower. Number 29, Archivist Alessiana. Only essential in Control v Control matchups, even though it was really good in those matchups or in decks that require you to go into fatigue or destroy your deck, it is nothing special by itself. Number 28, Totem Golem. It's a very good card in early Hearthstone. You play this after a Tunnel Trog, your opponent is not having a good time, but compared to the other cards in this list, it does not have the longevity to be played still. Number 27, Swashbuckler. Still sort of played today. It's a solid card for Rogue to have, nothing special about it though. Just keep on doing you, Swashbuckler. Number 26, Muster for Battle. Still played today, still a very good card, but it's not as game-changing as the cards above it. Number 25, New Heights. I had no idea where to put this card, but it looks kind of broken, so I'll put it here. Number 24, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. This card was single-handedly able to win you some games if you get good pulls from your Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, and I'll give it some points for changing the random discovery mechanic. Number 23, Multi-Strike. Another card which basically made Aggro Demon Hunter as good as it was. Deals so much damage, is synergistic with so many different cards, just a big threat when played. Number 22, Sire Denathrius. This card is really good. It was a big boss monster card that you knew was coming, but there are ways to play around this card, and it's not incredibly busted if you know how to. Number 21, Emperor Thorsan. A classic combo enabling card. I don't really have anything bad to say about it, it's just not as impactful as the cards above it. Number 20, Celestial Alignment. This card completely changed how druids were played for a while. It disrupts your opponent in a way where it benefits you drastically, basically making you win the game, and it got nerfed to oblivion again, but that is what just happens sometimes when the card is this good. Number 19, Boogie Down. Nothing negative to say about this card, you just play it, boom, a bunch of things happening. There's nothing really negative about Boogie Down, it's just always been a good card and it will stay a good card. Number 18, Solar Eclipse. I could see arguments that it's worse than Celestial Alignment, but I do not think Celestial Alignment is as good without Solar Eclipse. It enables so many cards, it was used in so many different decks like Token or Nature Druid, just so versatile. Number 17, Lightning Bloom. This card has Mana Cheat written all over it. It's the reason why Mana Cheat was so easy in the Druidstone era of Hearthstone. Number 16, Wildheart Guff. 4 of the last 5 cards were Druid, that is crazy. This card enabled so many combos, it let you survive, it let you mana ramp and do your stupid combos so much earlier. It's just the card that tied Druidstone all together, and I am glad we are finally out of this era. Number 15, Yogg-Saron Hope's End. A very versatile OG card, a great win condition, you could play it in so many things. The only problem is it's just a bit random. It's not a win condition if you lose when you play it. Number 14, Ziliax. It's just a really good card, but nothing more than that. So versatile, used everywhere, but nothing game breaking like the ones above it. Number 13, Astalar Bloodsworn. We're getting into the territory of cards that utterly broke the game. Astalar Bloodsworn broke the game for a while and then it got nerfed, and even at its nerf, it was still a solid card, but that one initial stint in its glory days where it was just destroying everyone is what brings it so high. Number 12, the Caverns Below. Another card that was busted on launch. Unfortunately, they kind of hard nerfed this card, so I cannot rate it that high. But for that one brief moment where the Caverns Below was the meta, you could not beat it. Number 11, Bran Bronzebeard. An OG combo enabling card. It was so versatile, used in so many different decks. Nothing but respect for this card. But the cards above it broke the game in one way or another. Starting our top 10 is Ziliax Deluxe 3000. Now, I might be rating this too high because it's kind of new, but I have a feeling this card will be played more than the original Ziliax. It is more versatile, it is better in every way, but only time will tell how good this card will be. Number 9, Reno Lone Ranger. Same with Ziliax, this card's been out for a bit longer. Same with Ziliax Deluxe 3000, this card is pretty new. I think it's going to stay relevant in Standard for its entire lifetime now. It's just such a big win condition. Number 8, Undertaker. The first broken card, and I have to give it respect for that. You play this on turn 1 and they can't deal with it, and that is an instant win. But I've been thinking, is Undertaker good because the card is broken, or is Undertaker good because the cards around it just sucked? So that's why it gets a respectable place. Number 7, Corridor Creeper. 5 attack, Corridor Creeper will haunt nightmares forever. Even at 2 attack, this card was still used, it can be evolved, it's cheap, it's great in a bunch of aggro decks, an essential card for aggro decks before it got nerfed, and even still after it got nerfed, it was still played. Number 6, the Demon Seed. I've never seen a card get changed and nerfed so much. This card literally got banned for a while, and it pretty much restricted any self-damage cards printed for Warlock for the 2 years it was released. Absolutely dominated the meta for a bit. I am just glad it is gone. Number 5, Yogg-Saron Unleashed. The original version and post-tuning version are both amazing cards. They all have some sort of jank in their own way, and are staples to every control deck so far after its release. Number 4, Prince Keleseth. When a card single-handedly brings your win rate up by at least 25% when you play the card, that is a broken card. Not as broken as the top 3, but it deserves its spotlight for when it was busted. Number 3, Zephyrus. It's hard to say that a card that gives you the best card in every scenario is a bad card. Good in literally every situation, there is nothing bad about this card at all. Number 2, Shudderwalk. At release, the people were petitioning to ban this card. It would take 10 minutes to do its animation, and even after its nerf, it is still used in decks all around. I know I'm not considering Wild, but to say that this card is still used in Wild is a testament to how good this card really is. And number 1, the best card of Hearthstone's history, Patches the Pirate. The best card is a 1 mana 1/1, but this 1 mana 1/1 deals so much damage. Can trade into minions when it's on the board, great with pirates, great with tokens, great for everything. If you stayed this long, thank you first of all, and you might like this video right here. This video took me so long to do, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe, maybe join channel membership if you like it and you want to see more. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you around. Oh my goodness, I still have to edit this video.